sports. So like I said, we highlighted a number of things, but I won't dwell on that because of time. In terms of the educational system where children, like 30 million children out of school, how can we have those ones participate in sports? We have 30 or 40 of them in schools. Some of them are not even properly, they don't have adequate facilities for them to be able to practice sports. So we need to overcome all of that. In terms of recommendation, which is very key, I think Nkechi should give us some form of insights. We were not looking at that, but I can assure you we have some other, good recommendations as well. So create a demand for every child to partake in sports in school. What we think that would do is to create that demand. If it's compulsory at all levels from the primary, secondary to even tertiary, where you have a government policy, a policy driven by government that each child must participate in sports, whatever sports that child chooses to participate in, then it creates some level of demand in terms of what sort of facilities do you have to provide? Because you can't ask a child to do a sport and you don't provide that, the type of facility that is required for that child to be able to participate in that sport. So that's recommendation number one. We said make use of land space area to build quality sporting facilities and make it accessible to schools in that locality. So today we're talking about more than 100,000 facilities that is required, but today the target is 3,000 facilities, cluster facilities. So what we think the first policy we do is to trigger that need, that demand, and then people will then start using spaces within schools and even spaces that are close to schools to be able to create those clusters of facilities that is required. The third one is need to create a digital and technology aspect in order to attract venture capital or any other form of funds to support the industry. So what that means is, what we're trying to do is, today everything is driven by a digital platform. So we've asked that each school should report the participation of children in sports. They can't do that by sending some form of written document. This has to be uploaded via the digital platform. And so we're beginning to see, we're gathering data. We can use those data to do so many other things as we go along. And that is, data is gold. Then need to attract impact investors at the initial stage. So this is critical. As it is today, the structure, the framework, everything does not attract private capital. So even the DFIs, as it is, they don't have that source of fund for them to be able to pursue what we need to see. So it's impact, as in patient capital that can wait and then see the kind of impact in terms of developmental goals, in terms of how you engage people in schools, how you bring in more people into educational system and all of that. So we need an impact fund. And thank God, Nkechi mentioned the fact that there's going to be, we're going to float an SPV, and that SPV is, I think that's the SPV that's going to kind of run that fund. Then subsequent to that, we recommend that an FI like BOI can then set up a fund like they've done for other sectors. They can set up a sports facility or sporting facility fund, like the manufacturing fund, the aviation fund that they've done, the creative industry fund, the fashion fund. We need a sports fund. So this is another recommendation that we've made. Then subsequent to this, we also recommend that an institution like Development Bank of Nigeria also needs to create a program, like a guarantee program, individual guarantee or portfolio guarantee program, where as the impact fund begins to gain momentum, we then see that maybe commercial banks might then want to, like they are doing now with the other funds that have been created, they might then want to participate. So what the guarantee portfolio or guarantee would then do is to give them that comfort that is required, that in case their money is, they're going to lose money, they can claw back somehow. Some partial guarantee, some level of guarantee has to be in place to be able to catalyze commercial funds. Then the last one I think we have is all government-related financial institutions are to devote a percentage of their profits. So maybe profit after tax or profit before tax or something like that can then be sterilized and then put into the same SPV. And that SPV will then use this fund to continue to build infrastructures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry and his group. We truly appreciate those insights, particularly the insights that say we need to have a special fund, to at least accelerate our infrastructure. That's absolutely, brilliant. We'll take that into consideration. So I'm going to call on incentives and policy. That's in real.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I must say, when I was leaving my discussion group today, my comment to my team members was that I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. Oh. Yeah, it was an interesting session. I'm very happy. We had a very diverse group, and there were so many viewpoints from. We covered a broad spectrum of things. But I'll just walk you through some of our discussion process and then let you know what we arrived at the end of the day. And our own approach is a little bit different. I know I might not remember everything we talked about, so I'm definitely going to call on my team members to say one or two things at the end of the day. Okay, so it's interesting that the previous group also looked at challenges, because that was where we started from. Because the truth is, this morning we had a conversation, finance follows value. That's the truth. You can't legislate it. You can't force people to, bring out their money if they're not going to see the value. So the first thing that we looked at was, what are the challenges that the sports sector, we agreed we were going to call it a sector, it's not yet an industry. Okay, so what are the challenges hindering financing right now, hindering the flow of finance to the sports sector? And one of the things we identified was that even the appetite for our local sports is not there anymore. Because if I should take a poll in this room and ask everyone, I'm sure Nigerians love football. If I should ask all of us here, what's your favorite football club? I'm sure maybe I might have, maybe half of the room could be Chelsea. Yeah. One third could be Arsenal. You understand? But maybe if we're lucky, we might find one Enyimba. Why? That appetite is not there. And before you can start funding the sector, that demand has to be there. So what are the things that are, what are the things that are not making it there? And, some of the challenges that have been mentioned earlier, we also looked at them again. Like lack of infrastructure, it's there. Lack of insecurity. If you're going to gather a group of people in a room and say, come and watch football or watch anything, there has to be, if I don't feel secure, I'm not going to go out there, So having identified these challenges, we now looked at some recommendations. Chief amongst these recommendations was that for finance to flow to the sports sector, it has to be repackaged as a beautiful bride and presented to the providers of finance. That has to happen. Sports has to be, the sector has to be looked at in like an entire value chain. And I'm happy we talked about some of that in the morning. You know, we have to start from, you have to look at all the different parts of it. Manufacturing, you know, the equipment, you know, how do we drive local content? You know, managing the actual event. You know, who are the owners of the sports club? How are these clubs being managed? Are they, do we have any policies in place to channel, you know, or to at least put in proper corporate governance so that we don't have every day FIFA is threatening to ban us from playing football for life, you know? You know, how do we do that? And all the way down to what I would like to call the downstream part of it, the entertainment part, you know, the hospitality, the, you know, it covers a whole broad spectrum actually, you know. Okay, now, another recommendation was that there has to be maybe tax incentives. We talked about maybe encouraging banks to do more CSR. Although we did agree that CSR, given is not the solution, it will just scratch a little bit on the surface, but maybe it can add a little value. Encouraging banks to do CSR, how do you encourage them to do CSR? Maybe, could we talk about tax incentives? You know, and the tax incentives should cover all the players really. For the providers of finance, maybe, you know, there's like for the banks, the CSR, maybe whatever amount they spend on CSR is tax-free. I don't know. For the business owners, maybe they have a tax holiday. I mean, these are things that could encourage people. And then for the consumers, how about if sports, locally manufactured sports items are VAT-free? That's, I mean, we could pursue that. They will need to have a lot of interagency collaboration, but I think it can be done. And then on the other side, we talked about insurance, that, you know, we mentioned, we talked about some players that, I mean, when we were talking about it, Rashidi Yakini came to mind. That was sad, you know, given so much to the country, and at the end of the day, just died like that. That was, you know, so in fact, that's even part of what would even stop some people from going into sports professionally, actually. You know, when you feel like there's no safety net, nothing to hold you. So sports insurance, there were so many, you know, suggestions made in that area, and we deliberated on that a lot. Then we also talked about guarantee, you know, that there should be, you know, some form of guarantee and all of that. They talked about it also. And then, yeah, I know, funding, right? Yeah. Intervention window, yeah. CBN intervention. The truth is that we've always had this, the problem we've always had in the country on several issues is you have a problem, you throw money at the problem. Yeah. That's not the solution. You have to de-risk the sector. That's the number one thing. You know, we talked about that also. You look at the risk in the sector, look at how you can, you know, just identify all of them, at least once you can, start tackling it from those challenges, you know, and at the end of the day, finance will follow it naturally. At this point, I didn't mention data. We talked about data. And I think maybe I'll call on, because he had so much to talk about on data. Yeah, I was looking for, unfortunately, within the introduction, so come and say a little bit about data. You had a lot to say about it. Yeah. We're almost done.
We're almost done.
So I'll just try to keep it brief. The whole concept around data was to drive value. Like she said, if we can show that there's value, the money would follow. And for us, it's being able to not just show we have an active youth population, but also show demand, you know, and market value in terms of how many people are actually participating in sports, how many people are actually going to subscribe to maybe streaming services, how many people are actually going to, buy tickets to go watch games physically, how to strategically position these infrastructures we're talking about in commercially viable areas and all of that. So, data is the reason why we are suffering financial inclusion, health, lack of health inclusion and all of that, and it cuts across every sector. And if we are able to use information systems and tools like basic softwares like we're building at ARMS, we will be able to extract data, like he said, from the schools who can put up their reports digitally. Individual athletes who are not in schools be able to put up their data, their stats, their content, and even from the federation level. And part of the policies we talked about is having the government institutions help us enforce, the adoption of such technologies that would help us drive data. With data, we can make informed decisions, informed investments, and we can prove that there's actually a market for it. The only reason CBN brought in the creative fund was when we rebased our GDP, like she said, right? And everybody saw the value contribution of the entertainment industry. We don't have that for sports yet, but with data, we would be able to establish our case and then have our beautiful bride to attract financing.
Okay, so I don't know if anybody else in the team wants to say something. Okay, thank you so much for...
Thank you very much to the policy people. It's becoming clearer and clearer that it's not that there isn't any money. We just have to present the sector in a beautiful, bright way. Last, but by no means the least, is Dami and Kewe to come and talk to us about infrastructure. Very robust discussions with infrastructure people.
Thank you. Like every other group, we looked at the issues and challenges. We spent way too much time talking about issues and challenges. Way too much time. But we all agree that one of the issues with infrastructure is there is a limit of focus on just football. So when people talk about infrastructure, generally it is on football, and it limits our view as regards what infrastructure could be. We also agree that there's no effective utilization of the existing ones, which is supposed to be like a foundation towards attracting investors for subsequent ones. If the ones we have are fully utilized, it's easier to make a case for additional investments into infrastructure. We talked about accessibility of existing facilities, where you have to number one, transport. Where you have to travel, too long to access facilities. Even when you get there, it becomes almost inaccessible. You're asked to pay a ridiculous amount of money. You have to write letters to the DG of a commission that now forward it to the chairman of the commission. So all those bottlenecks, we identified them. So part of our recommendations is, one, in terms of infrastructure, the short-term infrastructure developmental needs should be community-based, where we said that it's easier for you to start from that level. It's easy to drive demand at that level for infrastructure, where you have communities. There was a publication released, I think, by Lagos State government saying that some estates were not built to urban and planning specifications. If you have those kind of policies too around building estates and making sure that if you have a square meter, there's a sports facility within that radius, then it becomes easy to improve infrastructure. So one of the key infrastructure areas we looked at is the community-based infrastructure development. We also looked at education, and we said that, see, if you want to again drive that demand for sports, we need to invest in infrastructure in schools, primary schools, secondary schools, and up to that level and scale up. So those are the two areas we looked at in terms of infrastructure. We also said that beyond just physical infrastructure, there's a human capital development too that we need. So we talked about training institutions, where whatever it is you do in terms of community infrastructure and education will be like your starting point. Then it fits into the elite level, where you now need to train people, you need to train coaches, you need to train athletes at that level. So we also looked at that, training infrastructure, where it can be, statewide, it could be zonal, or it could be regional. We also looked at, those are like the primary infrastructure that we need. Now that feeds into, a larger radius of infrastructure where you now look at transport, you look at real estate around that, you look at data too, because whatever information you can get from these community infrastructures helps you in building, larger infrastructures, which now feeds into your elite performance and your proper professional club infrastructures. So we didn't have enough time because we talked so much about the problems, so we didn't have too much time to look at the recommendations. But definitely when we send in our MOUs, we'll include detailed recommendations. So thank you very much. Did I miss anything out? Did I do justice to it? All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. At the end of the day, thank you very much, everybody. At the end of the day, it's clearly established that there is opportunity. The thing is, how do we harness the opportunity? How do we repackage sports, which is what this process is, and it will be driven by a policy that addresses all these issues. Going forward, what's going to happen is, as I said, we're going to send the memorandum format we send these reports and we'll send the memorandum format. So please expect you to engage a little bit more with your stakeholder group and return this. We are given 10 working days, which is to return this memorandum, because we will collate in time for the policy dialogue in Benin, which we'll expect a few of you to attend, and will indicate to everyone who we expect to help us to attend, and now give bite to the reports that will be collated and brought there. We will debate those reports and agree that it represents a paradigm shift in how we want our policy to be before we now send to the policy drafting committee. And at that stage, we hope they will do justice to all our debates and give us a final 2020 national sports industry policy, which the minister can now take to FEC and, fingers crossed, get approved. That's the first step. Once it's approved, then we will now come and sit down with all the various stakeholder groups and say, you promised incentives like this, can you please give it to us? You promised this policy health, can you ensure that we get it? You promised. And yes, you spoke about the work that needs to interagency. The sports industry working group is going to be inaugurated tomorrow. That's the group that is responsible for that interagency. So tomorrow we'll send the links out. You can follow us. So that we have preempted that suggestion by understanding through the interministerial technical session that was held in November. A strong recommendation was for that interagency connector to ensure that whatever we are saying is implemented. So on behalf of the NESG and the Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports, thank you very, very much for attending. The Honorable Minister is aware that all these engagements are going. And in due course, I'm sure he will find a way to say thank you personally to everyone. Once again, please help us return the memos, please. We would appreciate it. All right. Okay. Have a wonderful afternoon. And for those who traveled to be with us, please journey mercies back. Thank you. Please, there's some light refreshment, and if you can spend a little time networking, we would appreciate it. Thank you. Final group picture.